Hello, this is Roger Simon.
And Lionel Chetwynd.
Welcome back to Poliwood. In a minute, Matt Atchity and all the coming movies from Rotten Tomatoes. But first, we have with us today an old friend of mine and now a great documentarian. It always was a good one, now a great one. Andrew Marcus, the auteur of Hating Breitbart. Welcome, Andrew.
Great to be here.
Welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
So you'll reach across the table.
I cut my chops with you at Pajamas Media.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
The old days we were doing immigration films down in East LA.
Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about what it is that I'm going to comment on your work.
Hating Breitbart. We followed Andrew Breitbart around for the better part of 2.5 years. Stumbled upon the guy as I was documenting the Tea Party movement in its infancy. Started following him basically almost from the first moment that we saw him in Quincy, Illinois, September 12, 2009, which was 2 or 3 days after he launched the ACORN videos and launched Big Government. We followed him all the way through most of the major stories that he was involved with, starting with ACORN, the $100,000 reward that he put out for any evidence of the use of the N-word, this terrible race libel perpetrated by John Lewis and Andre Carson when they passed Obamacare. We were with them through the charade story, all the way up through what I call the world's most perfect story, Wienergate.
Wienergate. Well, not until David Petraeus.
What's perfect? Just the film itself. It has two things that really make it outstanding. It's one thing to gather material together, but this material is woven together. I would think there must be 800 to 1,000 cuts. It's edited, the editing, and yet at no time do you get uneasy or queasy, because there's none of this stupid camera, look at me, look how clever I am. It's actually telling the story, and there's no host. It's a no-host documentary. Right. You just simply let it roll, and it is just the most remarkable experience. I really do. I salute you. It's just a great film, and it is a tribute to Andrew, whom we all knew and loved. You understand what a force of nature was. The film communicates what it sets out to communicate, and which is who and what he was, and it's just a terrific achievement. Wow. I haven't seen a documentary like that in a long time.
At what point did you? Did Andrew know, and you were actually making a movie about him as opposed to seeing this charismatic figure at Tea Party events?
It was actually, he gave a speech at the first National Tea Party Convention, I think, as it is the last National Tea Party Convention, the only one. And, this was February of 2010, so we're talking about 5 months after the ACORN story had launched. Right. Andrew was being vilified. Andrew and James O'Keefe and Hannah Giles, all of them, were being vilified as racist. And the reason for this is the way the narrative played out for them is ACORN helps black people. If you're attacking ACORN, well, you're attacking black people, and therefore you must be racist. Why else would you be attacking black people? The Tea Party was facing a very similar narrative. You're attacking this president. This president is black. You're attacking a black president, i.e. you must be racist. And so the two forces came together at this convention. Andrew Breitbart under attack, the Tea Party under attack. And Andrew Breitbart stood up at this convention, and I've covered a bunch of these things, and I had never seen what I witnessed in this room. It was electrifying. 4 standing ovations with energy like I've never seen at anything like this. What happened in that moment is Andrew Breitbart stood up and he said, this is not just bias. This is contempt for the American people. Yeah. And he declared war. Now, up until that moment, I think that the standard response in conservative circles when you're called racist is to sort of duck your head, try and play it civil. Well, no, of course I'm not.
To be reasonable.
Right, exactly. He had a different approach.
Now, at that point, did he know you were making a movie about him?
No, neither did we, frankly. We were still covering the Tea Party at this point. But he was the most fascinating thing in the Tea Party, to speak of at that moment. So we saw this speech, and the way I describe this is that in that moment, the movement found their general in Andrew Breitbart, and he exhibited strength in that movement unlike anybody else.
They found in him a singular leader who could take them to the sound of the guns and explain why.
People were tired of the classic response to the accusation of racism, and people have been beaten down for so long by this machine that does this, that it was a breath of fresh air unlike anything that they had experienced firsthand. But here was somebody who had a different path. F.U., war. I mean,
at that time, he said, they have declared war on us.
That's exactly right. That's right. We're going to bring them a war. It's not a war that we asked for, though, but since they brought it to us, we're going to fight it. Upon witnessing that speech, I called him 2 weeks later with my producers and said, we would love to follow you. We think you're the story. We think what's happening with you is the story. And the pitch that I gave him was, as I've said, it's a cross between. The only thing I saw was it's a cross between U2's Joshua Tree and Spinal Tap. You're a rock star who doesn't take himself too seriously. Now, and that was just literally from what I had witnessed about him up to that point, was that he was this legend in the making. But he was so jovial and so, had such a zest for having fun and for living. And that is apparent just being around him for 15 minutes. You can tell that. So that was what came off to me. So that was what we embarked on. That's all we knew.
Mm-hmm. What I meant was they found their Judah Maccabee, a guy who could tell them why they were fighting and could lead them to victory, and his losses. I mean, can you assess his loss? I mean, the film implies that there were none other like him.
Oh, there is no other like him. He was one of a kind, and I think that's what made him so special. I mean, if it was easy to reproduce what Andrew Breitbart was, he wouldn't have been so special. But what he did, though, is that he not only did he show people a way to fight back, he stood as an example, and by example taught them how to do it. You take a look out there. There's a million citizen journalists who were emboldened by the work you guys do, by the work that he did. He inspired.
But he went into the public and took the blows.
Right, and that's the difference. That was part of the difference.
And therefore he was threatening, and which leads me to a question. Mm-hmm. Okay, I knew Andrew and I knew him well. For a long time, from the very beginning, going way back to when I first met him when he was in high school. An extraordinary man. He had a great lust for living, unlike anyone I'd ever seen. You would just eat with him, and you understood this lust for life that he had. I knew that he had pressed the limits of his heart on more than one occasion. Though when I learned that he had died, I'm enough of a contemporary American to have a moment to think, the black helicopter that I thought about. I said, no, it's not true. I accepted that, no, this was inevitable. However, almost everyone I know who didn't know Andrew believes that he was murdered by dark forces. You were with him more than anyone in those years. You knew him better. You want to comment on that?
Multiple promoters who've come into my life who would love nothing more than for me to be leading the charge of the conspiracy theory, because that sells. The fact is, I just don't think it's true. Andrew Breitbart, like you said, had a zest for living. They talk about people who burn the candle at both ends. He burned it in the middle. He found new places the candle no one knew existed. I mean, when you take into account the hard issues that he had a year earlier, and you take into account the lifestyle that he led, and I look, I've never documented anybody in battle. I assume that is far more stressful than anything Andrew Breitbart ever encountered. Outside of that, in civilian life, though, I've never witnessed the kind of stress that this man was under. Imagine just every night you turn on the television and they're calling you racist. They're vilifying you. Now that's happening to him on a national level.
He was as unracist as could be.
Right, absolutely. Now he's flying around the country. He was constantly in the air. I don't know.
I know, because every time I was on a plane, he was on it.
Right, that's right, tweeting away, torturing the left from 30,000 feet. Every city he landed in, he was in incredible demand. There were incredible demands on his time, and he never said no to anybody. He made himself available to anyone at any time. There was no bubble around him, and he had an endless energy to meet with people. He would then go out with his friends after a full 16-hour day of working, and he'd go out for another 4 or 5 hours. It was an endless, seemingly endless stream of energy, and I think it took its toll.
Well, you made the choice in the film, interestingly, and I think it was a good choice, not to really deal with the death, to hit it suddenly. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of a sudden you're looking at the absurd, execrable Anthony Weiner, and then boom, he died. I mean, I think it's very effective theatrically. I congratulate you on that, because it just throws your head back. Because I was sitting there expecting, knowing Andrew very, very well, he did the Drudge Report from my house. That's how well I do him. That you were going to then go to chapter 4 there and deal with everything at in Brentwood and what happened that night.
Right.
But you chose not to, and I think that was a wise decision.
It was, because really it wasn't germane to your film. I think that's why it succeeds, is that everything in it is ad rem, as the lawyers say. Everything in it is precise and to the point. It's an extraordinary film, and it must be seen. The obligation is upon all of us to see it, but it's also upon you to get it out there for us. So,
listen, and we've been out in theaters now, and the reaction has been, humbling. Frankly, people.
Oh, get over
it. I'm sure I'll be ground into the
No, you
pavement
can't build a
eventually.
Hollywood career on humility, right? We know that.
Well, no, I mean, coming from an internet guy, I mean, it's been a long road to make that leap, and we were on the project for, we followed him for 2.5, but we're producing the thing for coming up on 3 years. At that point, 3 years into a project, I'm not sure that anybody's going to share the vision. I don't even know that the vision is still what we started out on. Like you get really.
How many hours of film did you have in the end?
We have over 100 hours.
Over 100 hours.
Yeah.
You digitized it all, or you?
Yes. Oh
And
yeah.
what is this, an
Oh, yeah.
89-minute movie now?
Yes, that's right.
Now, so what are the distribution plans going forward? I urge everybody who is listening to this show, if you haven't seen this film yet, I know some of you probably have, but those who haven't, get the film. So how can they do it?
Right. Well, first of all, you should go to hatingbreitbart.com and take a look at our theater list. We have this awesome feature there called Demand It. So if we're not in your immediate area, you click on Demand It, you put in your zip code. There's a map there. You should see this map. It's unbelievable. There are dots. Literally, the country is just blanketed with these dots of where people have put in their zip code. But we send that information to our distributor and bring the film to where the demand is. We will take this as wide theatrically as we possibly can, and then of course we'll move on to DVD and VOD and video. And I think a large part of the audience, that's really where they live. Andrew was
That's
true. That's true.
But this is one worth going out for because tell us speaking of going out for, you must have seen this with various audiences. What were the reactions, and can you describe a little of
It
that?
depends on whether or not they know I'm in the room.
Yeah.
I feel like if they know that I'm in the room, I don't trust the applause.
Okay.
But they're laughing at the right spots. They seem to be energized by the film. And the thing that I think that is most gratifying is that when I'm hearing back that it doesn't matter where on the political spectrum you are, this film has relevance. And I think hopefully that's because we're speaking about the media and this machine of hatred. The progressive movement has essentially weaponized these newsrooms, and they use these weapons to assassinate character, whether it's of individuals like Andrew Breitbart, or entire groups of people, like the Tea Party movement or the conservative movement. And this film really aggregates it in a way that hopefully crystallizes and makes it easier for people to see that this machine is in place.
I think that is an achievement of the film as well.
Speaking of that achievement, and what you just mentioned, which was people on both sides seeing the movie, have you ever? How do you outreach to the other side? This is something Lionel and I talk about all the time, because look, here we are on PJTV. And, in all honesty, most of the viewers of this show are on our side. One way or the other. Yeah, you think. But, how as filmmakers, all of us sitting at this table, think all the time, how do we get our work out there to the other side? Have you dealt with that at all on this?
Absolutely. Well, interestingly, this particular film, the other side has a dark fascination with it. They want to see it to see how they can destroy it, or they want to, the first thing they try to do in a situation like this actually is try to ignore it. And you have to create enough momentum so that they can't ignore it. And there's enough of the other side in this film that they, I think, are drawn to it out of curiosity to see how did we handle these particular subjects. I think a big part of it is reach out to them. Send them the film, send them the screeners, get them make sure that they know that you're not just doing something just for one particular audience, that this is something for anybody to see. We were very lucky at our opening screening in Washington, D.C., a woman by the name of Roxanne Roberts, who's a very talented writer for the Washington Post in the style section. She came to see it because she was curious. And she came up to us afterwards. She says, I couldn't be more on the other side of the spectrum from Andrew Breitbart in terms of, ideologically, but also in terms of his perspectives on journalism and what journalism should be. And she said, but I was absolutely moved to think about my assumptions because of seeing this film.
Did she write about it?
She did write about it. gave us a very interesting.
Dismissively?
No, she was amazing. Now we got the dismissive treatment from the Washington Post when it went over to the film critic, but that kind of proved our thesis anyway.
Well, that's interesting. Anyway, well, there you have it. Our next Poliwood, we're going to go from Tyrant Duke to Tyrant Brother. On the other side of the state, we're going to be discussing Oliver Stone's new documentaries on American history.
Yes, Oliver Stone has visited his view of American history upon the world.
Well, you didn't call this movie, Andrew Marcus's Andrew Breitbart. He calls it Oliver Stone's U.S. history. But anyway, now over to Rotten Tomatoes for a look of what's coming up in the theaters.
Hi, this is Matt Atchity, editor-in-chief of RottenTomatoes.com, here to let you know what's fresh and what's rotten in theaters this weekend. First up, the last Twilight movie hits theaters this weekend. Breaking Dawn Part 2 works its way into theaters. Wide release, everybody's going crazy over this movie, except the critics. The critics don't like it at all. 55%, 50%, it's hovering in the 50s right now, definitely rotten. Most of the critics say this is the best film of the franchise, but a lot of them are saying, doesn't matter, it still stinks. That being said, the fans of this franchise are going to see this movie. They're going to line up in droves to go see it. At the theater I was at, there were a lot of fans in the theater. They had a great time. There were lots of cheering. I'm not the target audience. I didn't like this movie, but I went with some people who love the franchise. They had a great time. So if you love these movies, you're going to be really happy here. If you've never seen one of them, dear God, don't go see this. I don't know why you would possibly get dragged into this. Next up, expanding to wide release is Lincoln, Steven Spielberg's story of our greatest president who signed the 13th Amendment, and this is the story about getting the 13th Amendment passed. Now, I talked about this a little bit last week, but it was only in limited release. This now opens nationwide. So if you want to see a real movie, not the vampire one, this is the one to see. 90% on the tomato meter, and I'm going to say you heard it here first. My prediction is that Daniel Day-Lewis is going to win the Best Actor Oscar this year. That's it for the movies in theaters this week. For all of the movies opening wide and new to DVD, make sure to check RottenTomatoes.com.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks again to Andrew Marcus, author of Hating Breitbart. This has been Roger Simon.
And Lionel Chetwynd.
Next week in Poliwood with Oliver Stone.